and this is the worst patch in video game history. What's up, guys? Yo Jimbo here. We have the patch notes dropped for season 1 of Diablo 4. That is the season of the Malignant. And well, frankly, if you are on the internet, Reddit, Twitter, whatever it may be, the Diablo forums, it's not looking good. We've gone through the patch notes. We've cherry picked a couple of pieces out, the good and the bad, and we're going to go over them here today. Let's take a look. All right, kicking off these bad patch notes, we're going to have the Sorcerer new unique item. Now, this is the Oculus. And if you played Diablo 2, you'll know exactly what this item is, at least what it was in Diablo 2. And they've given us essentially only the bad part of that weapon with this ability here. So for the Sorcerer, not only are you taking up a weapon slot legendary affix for this, you are essentially replacing it with a downside. So what it does here is it gives you the teleport enchantment for free, and when you evade on the sorcerers with the teleport enchantment, you are taken to a random location. So if you played Diablo 2, you know the Oculus weapon, what would happen was we got a pretty powerful weapon, had plus skills, had good magic find on it, overall a pretty solid weapon. But the downside was whenever you got hit, you had a chance to be randomly teleported. Now, I don't know if you play ARPGs, but if you do, you know what that means. It means you're dead. That's right. If you're just teleporting into random locations, you're going to teleport into a pack of mobs and you're just going to die. This is never good. You never want to have random RNG taken in place. Now, the one thing would be probably even better in Diablo 2 was you had a chance to proc when you got hit. So at the very least, it was, potentially when you were put into a position where you're going to be taking a lot of damage, you get hit, it teleports you out of that damage. This is going to be actually the complete opposite. So when you evade in Diablo 4, you're normally trying to get out of a damaging effect. And now this is going to not let you evade where you wanted to evade, but instead it's going to make you teleport somewhere random, which potentially could be right back into that one-shot mechanic or the CC or whatever the case may be. So this is a straight up L. I'm definitely down for Blizzard putting in like cool, unique throwback items to old things, nostalgia points and stuff like that. But this isn't the way to go about doing that. They also added in another legendary we'll take a look at real quick up here. We have the Spear of Lysander, which isn't actually a spear. It's actually a staff because they don't have a spear type or something. I guess, I don't know why they decided to call it a Spear of Lysander. I understand Lysander's spear exists in the other games, but to call it a spear here when we don't have a spear type, they're just going to call it a staff instead. Just doesn't make very much sense to me. Also, it's going to be another uber unique. This means, you're never going to find it. The odds of you finding it be extremely similar, are going to be extremely similar to that of like Shaco and Dario's helmet, so on and so forth. And this ability is just worse than what we had from our Shrine Effect weapon in Diablo 3. So this is going to be a random Shrine Effect for 10 to 20 seconds after killing an elite enemy and can only reoccur every 30 seconds. So, I mean, honestly, that's not very good. The other stats on this item would have to be exceptional, absolutely exceptional to be playable. It would need to have, perfect rolls for whatever your build is, and no dead rolls on it for this even to be even thought about being used. Because remember, this is taking up a two-handed weapon slot, which means this is a buffed aspect that you're missing out on, a 200% aspect that you're missing out on that you would normally have on your two-handed weapon slot. You're losing that. So the odds of this being good are going to be pretty slim. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at the one that I think is actually good. Let's see, where was it here? Here we go. Lidless Wall. This is a shield from the older Diablo games again. This has one that could potentially be really good. So it's not all bad here. It is a lucky hit chance, so there's not a guarantee that it's going to always be happening. But if Necromancers have a way to make this proc very often, I could definitely see where this could be useful. So while you have an active Bone Storm, which already isn't a terrible ability, hitting an enemy outside of a Bone Storm has a 25% chance to spawn an additional Bone Storm at their location. Each of your active sacrifice bonuses increases this chance by 25%, and the total number of additional Bone Storms you can have by 1. So I think that this could actually be pretty useful. You could stack up a lot of Bone Storms with this. Obviously, it doesn't have any single target applications, but I could definitely see a build popping up that will have you spamming Bone Storms all over the place with this. It could be a very fun build. I don't think it's anything that's going to be game breaking, but it's one of the few things that I looked at and said, you know what, that's actually kind of decent. Changes the way you might play the game, and is a little bit of a buff to what we currently had. The new legendary aspects have not really been great, though I will say as a Druid main, the Druid one does intrigue me, but the other ones definitely leave a lot to be desired. So the general ones we have are Audacity, which says when there's at least 5 close enemies, stun them for 2 to 4 seconds. It only can occur every 20 seconds. That's just straight up bad. That's not going to be a good ability. We have Craven, which says you gain 20 to 40% increased movement speed when moving away from slowed or chilled enemies. I don't really understand why they would want to put something like this. This incentivizes you not killing enemies in the game, right? So this would incentivize you while you're moving to just hit an enemy once to slow or chill them. And then, while you're running through the dungeon where you're not actually killing all of the trash mobs. It seems kind of counterintuitive the way they want you to play the game. It also doesn't say how far or how long you get to keep this buff for. And it doesn't say how far away from them. When will it trigger or not trigger or whatever the case may be. Definitely a weird wording on that one. The Barbarian one has a chance of being okay. So Ancestral Charge, offensive aspect, charge cost worth 4 Ancients, who also charge, dealing 50 to 100% of the normal damage. So you put this on a weapon, and a two-handed weapon, you'll have 200% of the normal damage, making it a really good multiplier. But the question will be, is how much overlap are these additional 4 Ancients going to have? If they can overlap and shotgun damage, this could be really good. This could be an 800% damage multiplier, depending on how the AoE works on the charge with the 4 Ancients. If they're very spread apart, then this is just going to be kind of mid. But charge currently sees almost no play, and it probably won't have any change if that's the case. But if this does overlap, I could see people using this. It seems like a pretty good aspect on the Barbarian one there. Subterranean, this is the one that I kind of like, and this will probably be what I level with starting with the new season, as I'll probably be rolling Druid again. So Subterranean is offensive aspect. It says Poison Creepers active, so that's when you actually click the button of your Poison Creeper. It casts Landslide in a circle around you. Earth skills deal 20% increased damage to poison enemies. If you have a Poison Creeper out, everything should be poisoned anyway, doesn't matter. The reason why I think it's going to be pretty good is, Landslide's already an okay leveling ability. This is essentially doubling your damage, right? Giving you an additional landslide proc every time you click your Poison Creeper, which we already have ways to reset the Poison Creeper's cooldown that we use in current builds. And then also we have other legendary abilities like the ones that give us additional companions. So this will give us actually 2 free procs of landslide every time we click our Poison Creeper's button, assuming it works the way the wording says it kind of works anyway. And then it lets you transition into the whole trample slide build, and it just seems like it has a good progression for a leveling skill, and helps you get through the content until you find your Wear NATO helmet or whatever the case may be. The Necromancer one, this one is, I don't really have an opinion on this because I know that there was a Bloodlance problem and they had to fix a bug, crashing games, so on and so forth. But it says it will consume blood orbs. It will also conjure lances from them. Each additional blood lance deals 50% of normal damage and prioritizes targets targeting unlanced enemies. So you're getting blood lances for free at half damage, or 20%, 50% of the normal damage. And then it prioritizes enemies that have not been hit yet. So maybe a good way to kill some trash mobs while you're running through maps or something like that. Overall, I think this is just going to be a nice quality of life. I don't really see this making Bloodlance a super good ability or anything like that. I feel like this is something that's just going to kind of be dead in the water when we get to it. The Rogue one is kind of okay, because it's something that you can just add into something you're already doing. So Pestilent points is an offensive aspect. Every third cast of Puncture is poison imbued with 150% of normal potency. Put this on your bow, a two-handed weapon, and you have a 300% of normal potency. So what we have here is an ability that already gets used a lot, Puncture, with an imbuement that already gets used a lot, Poison Imbuement, with a really high multiplier, 300% on a two-handed weapon, 150 on a one-handed weapon. So this is definitely something that could see play. Puncture is one of the few basic abilities that really can do a decent amount of damage on its own. You don't need a core skill to back it up. Though, I mean, you usually playing Twisting Blades, Rapid Fire, something of that nature. But this could open up possibilities to a basic attack build. There's a lot of multipliers for that. And then sorcerers get Searing Wards, which is after spending 200 to 100 mana, so you want a 100 roll, on your next fire wall is free to cast and will destroy incoming small missiles. Don't know what small missiles means, right? So I don't think we have any wordings like this in the game currently, at least none that I've seen. So it'll take some testing to figure out what's considered a small missile, what's not considered a small missile. This is something that could be pretty broken. So destroying projectiles from the enemies is something that could be completely degenerate and broken, and a huge defensive layer. Depends on how it interacts. The fact that you get a firewall for free is mostly irrelevant. I know that Crypt has a firewall build, but it's not meta, so to say. It's kind of annoying to play, so I don't think getting the firewall itself is going to be much of a offensive aspect like it says it is, but it could be a really strong defensive ability here, getting the free firewalls. The next part of the Bad News Bears is going to be the changes to the experience rewards for killing monsters. So if you're a longtime player of the Diablo franchise, you know that power leveling was a very important thing, or a very widely used things in all of the games. In Diablo 2, we had just straight up G rushes, we called them, which are called glitch rushes. And that would get you from Act 1 of normal to Act 4 of hell normally, or the very beginning of Act 5 of hell. And you would get there around, level 5. You would get some experience by being in the areas that you needed to be in for boss kills, and that was it. So it was called a glitch rush because you used some clever use of game mechanics to get around some quests that required you to do certain things. You would just have to be in the area while the rusher would do the specific thing, and you would get credit for it even though you didn't actually do it. Anyway, this is a very big thing. It's been in Diablo 2 forever. And then in Diablo 3, you had straight up power leveling, right? So all you had to do is be in a group with higher level people. They'd bring you into a really big rift, a really high tier rift, and you would just have to stand at the beginning, and they would go in and kill all the monsters. You would get the experience, and you could reach max level and be able to get into the end game grind in just under an hour a lot of times. And then in Diablo 4, it was the same way. So you would just go into a tier 50 nightmare dungeon. You would sit there at the beginning. Somebody would kill all the mobs, and you'd be able to power level yourself up. So this is a reoccurring thing in Diablo games for a long time. And I think I said in my last video that I didn't think this is something they were going to change because it was such a common thing that's been in Diablo for a very long time. But it turns out I was wrong. So first thing they're going to do is they are going to be nerfing the reward for killing monsters that are a higher level than the player. So before this update, if you were 1 level higher, you got a 15% bonus, 2 levels 20, 3 levels 25% bonus to the experience you got from the monster. And post, it is going to be 1.5, 3, and 15 when you're 10 levels for 10 levels higher. It's a little bit different. It's they're changing the algorithm there, and it seems like they want to slow down the leveling process a bit, actually quite a bit. That doesn't affect power leveling though. That's just your natural leveling. This is going to be the little power leveling bit here. So currently in World Tier 2, it's a +3 to monster level. World Tier 3 is +10, and the World Tier 4 is +100, right? So that means you could be getting bonuses for monsters. If you're level 5, you get bonuses for monsters up to level 105. So what they're going to be changing it to is we really only care about the World Tier 4 option. The other ones don't really matter. Only to +10. So if you are at level 5, the most experience you're going to get is going to be from a mob that is level 15. So power leveling still will exist. It's just going to be significantly slower than it currently was, or I guess at this point was, not currently is. The patch is live. So this is going to prioritize speed farming more than higher tier farming. So instead of just running, whoever your power leveler is, just running a tier 50 sigil, what they'll do now is they'll run a level 10 sigil. You'll get some levels from that. Then you go up to a level 12 sigil, level 14 sigil, level 16 sigil, level 20 sigil, and you'll keep scaling up in your experience level, trying to keep you right at that plus 10 mark so that they can kill the mobs as fast as possible and you are getting the maximum experience. This is going to slow down that process a ton. Obviously, there's a lot of backlash on this. Nobody wants to do the leveling grind more than once. It's kind of become a standard in gaming these days. There's a couple of ARPGs that have kind of stood by it. PoE, you have to go through the campaign every single time. There's no skips. There's no power leveling. There's no nothing. A lot of people are upset about that in PoE, and I think a lot of people are going to be upset about that here in Diablo, because especially since the Diablo series is not really known for redoing the campaign yourself, grinding through it over and over and over and over again. So we'll see how this turns out. More nerfs on deck. This time it's for the actual one fun event that happens out in the open world, and that's the Helltide event. If you guys aren't doing Helltide, you probably should. It's a good way to farm really good gear. There's a lot of mobs. It's just a really fun event to get out there and do. The mobs will be a little bit harder now. So previously they were all 2 levels higher than whatever your character level was. Now they're going to be 3 levels higher than your character level. So be aware of that, especially if you're playing hardcore. That's going to be a little bit tougher. The biggest nerf here is the Gift of Mysteries. So if you don't know, the way Helltide works is you would kill monsters, you get cinders as a currency. Cinders are used to open up chests that are in the Helltide area. And there is one chest called the Mystery Chest. So there would be a chest for weapons, armor, jewelry, helmet, legs, whatever the case may be. And then there was a mystery chest that could drop anything from it. And this is what people would farm. Normally it would cost 175 cinders, so you would just farm up enough to open like 2 or 3 mystery chests and then go open those up. Now they're going to cost 250 cinders. That is a pretty significant difference. That means to open up 2 chests, you need 500 cinders. And at the time of making this video, I'm getting reports in that the Helltides are currently bugged, with entire groups of enemies only dropping 1 to 3 cinders, which is a huge problem. That means in the 50-minute event or the 1-hour event, you would just hardly be able to get probably 1 chest opened at 250 with the mobs dropping nothing. Hopefully this is unintended and they are going to get this fixed. I don't think the additional cost of the chest is very significant, but obviously the mobs not dropping as many cinders seems like an unintended bug. So hopefully they will take a look into that. And what I do think they should do, instead of just upping the cost of the mystery chest, because that's the one that everybody wants to open, they should make the other chest, which costs less than the mystery chest, they should make the other chest more appealing by having them drop slightly better loot to be a little more on par with how the mystery chest works. I don't know. That just seems like a better option to me. Barbarian's one of the classes that actually didn't get a lot of nerfs in their patch notes, and I'll have them here. I'll scroll through them. We're not going to go through them all, but I'll scroll through them so that you can pause and read them and go through and see what exactly it is you want to do. This is one that you're going to see in a lot of in all of the different characters, which is a really good change that they made. In the Paragon boards, all the classes had a similar effect to this, but it would only affect core skills and not any of your other type of skills, which was kind of a bummer, especially for classes that were significantly relying on basic skills like the Claw Druid build, for instance. It'll now affect all damage instead of just core skills. This is going to be a repeating buff that you see in all of the different classes, and I'm glad that they have made this change. And it's a design philosophy that they should carry over into all other regions of the game. But that's for another video. So we got a bunch of buffs here. Now, I will say one thing that's not listed here. It's listed up in the bug fixes somewhere. The Hammer of the Ancients build is getting a significant nerf, but that is because the ability was bugged. So something was causing the outside edges of the Quake from Hammer of the Ancients to do significantly more damage than intended. So that would mean if you were to hit an enemy with the edge of the Hammer of the Ancients Quake, you would be doing an unintended amount of damage. So that would be sometimes why you would see your ability hitting for normal damages, and then sometimes you would get some extreme damage range on it, and that's because of the positioning of the enemy there. So they are fixing that. You can call it a nerf, but it's really just a bug fix. There's two big nerfs coming in on the Druid. I would say they've gone through mostly unscathed compared to something like the Sorceress. But this is a pretty big one that we did expect to be coming in. The Prime Grizzly Rage now grants Unstoppable for 6 seconds instead of while active. So for anybody who doesn't know, Grizzly Rage, when you would have it active, would have you being unstoppable the entire time, and you could have nearly 100% uptime on that, so you were just permanently unstoppable. Obviously, that's not intended the way they want the game to be. It doesn't give room for any kind of design choice or anything like that. You're just permanently unstoppable, and you just take that. But now it's just going to be a 6-second timer from the time you start the Grizzly Rage ability, and then the Unstoppable will fall off. So that's going to be a pretty big nerf, but nothing that we can't actually just deal with. The other one is going to be this right here. So Masochist was a huge part of the Druid healing if you were playing a Wolf build. So Masochist had a chance to heal you every time you do damage with a Werewolf ability, or maybe, yeah, pretty sure it's Werewolf ability. So now requires a lucky hit chance of 75%. And that is a significantly high number. This is very, very similar to what we'll see on the Rogues with their Siphoning Blades nerf for healing. So the Druids are going to not be able to heal as often with Masochist. I do think that this was overpowered, and I did assume that the nerf was going to be coming for it. So I'm not surprised by it, but it does kind of stink. Combined with not having permanent unstoppable, that's some pretty big defensive nerfs that the Druid is getting. All right, on to the one that we knew was happening here for the Necromancer. There's only one here that's really, really worth discussing because there's only one really, really overpowered build for the Necromancer, and that obviously was a Bone Spear. So if you've been paying attention to videos online, then you've probably seen that Bone Spear is able to nearly one-shot the Lilith fight. Not so much like the bugged abilities like Blizzard and something like that, but it was able to kill her very, very, very quickly, and you have the invulnerable mist for the phases that will one-shot you. So they are getting a bit of a nerf. So this Splintering Aspect Bone Shard damage was 100% bonus damage as for the Aspect, and it's going down to 60%. Now, people have already been playing on the patch, and I have heard the Necromancer saying that, they're really just getting rid of overkill damage in this situation. So it'll take a little bit longer to kill Uber Lilith, and they have a nearly unnoticeable difference in any other part of content in the game. When you're already hitting for, 10 million damage with your Bone Spears, lowering that down to, 6 million is not going to be very noticeable when you're doing Nightmare Dungeons, Hell Tides, etc., etc. The only place you're going to notice that is in the Uber Lilith fight, and it just means that you have to go through a couple extra phases, maybe. Once you've learned the mechanics of the Lilith fight anyway, that doesn't really matter. So it does seem like the Necromancer is going to be coming out mostly unscathed. There's a couple of buffs in here that are actually kind of cool for the Necromancer. They are getting some summoning buffs, which might make the summoner build a little bit better. I did see one in here with corpses where it will automatically trigger a corpse skill that is on your skill bar, and you will do a portion less damage, 50% less damage, but it triggers it for free for you, so a little bit of a hands-off quality of life. Could be really good for something like Corpse Tendrils or something of that nature. But overall, Necromancer's coming out on the good end of these nerfs. Rogues, on the other hand, are probably the only class that's actually coming out ahead in terms of buffs and nerfs. They are getting a survivability nerf with their Siphoning Strikes, giving them or needing to proc it with a 75% lucky hit chance, much like we talked about on the Druid, but everything else seems to be a little bit of a buff for them. They are getting a buff on all of these abilities going through here. I don't think there was really anything else that they were getting a significant nerf on. Everything else seems to be pretty good for them. They are even getting a new legendary for Penetrating Shot. I don't know if that's really going to make Penetrating Shot a super usable build. I do know that in the Server Slam and the betas, Penetrating Shot with Shadow Imbuement was actually kind of fun build to play, but my guess is, since I haven't really seen anybody else doing it in the live game, that it just didn't really scale, much like some of the other builds that we played in a level 25 beta did. So that'll be interesting to see if that makes it good enough to play. It was a very fun ability that I really enjoyed, so I wouldn't mind trying that out myself. If I had to take a guess based on these patch notes that I'm seeing here, I would say Rogue is going to be probably one of the best starting classes going into Season 1. There's one little tidbit of survivability that got kind of snuck into the general aspects here that some people might have missed while they're scrolling through, because it's not a part of the class-specific changes. But the aspect of disobedience was a major part of defense for almost every single class. So you would give stacks of armor, and it was based off of you attacking the enemy. The more hits that you hit the enemy with, the higher these stacks would go. They'd go up to 100. Now they only go up to 60 stacks. This is reducing the maximum armor bonus from 25 to 50%, also down to 15 to 30%. Now, we do know that armor loses value the higher you go. There is eventually a cap that you reach with armor based on the level of the enemies. So anything more after you've hit that cap is obviously useless. But this was a big part of being able to reach that cap in the higher tier dungeons. So this is also going to be combined with the fact that you're losing 750 flat armor from your ring, your jewelry slots in general, your rings and your amulet, because you're no longer going to have skulls in those spots, and now you're going to have these new Malignant hearts in there. So you're losing a big percentage buff to armor here with this change to the disobedience, and you're also losing a lot of flat armor with the change to the jewelry sockets. I don't know if this is going to make aspect of disobedience unusable, or I shouldn't say unusable because it's still usable, but it might turn out to be that a percentage damage reduction, let's say for Druid, for example, you could do damage reduction while in werewolf form now. And that would just, if you're always in werewolf form, you always will have that damage reduction. Might mean it's better than having this armor now that it has been nerfed. That's going to be to be determined, and we'll have to do some testing to figure that out. Anybody doing itemization for their characters knows that if there was an item slot that you could have cooldown reduction, that means you would definitely want to have cooldown reduction. Now, it seemed like a lot of the builds were, or a lot of the abilities were also balanced around the amount of cooldown reduction you could have. It seemed like it lined up pretty well, and apparently that wasn't the case because Blizzard feels like cooldown reduction is overperforming. So, on your gear pieces, cooldown reduction, the general stat, is getting a 30% reduction. Imbuement skill cooldown reduction is being reduced by 30%, and trap skill cooldown reduction is also being reduced by 30%. So what this means is if you were able to get 10% cooldown reduction on an amulet, that is now going to be 7%, right? This is going to be pretty significant in builds that rely on cooldown reduction. Once you start applying this to different gear pieces, for Druids, we have cooldown reduction on our totems and on our amulets, and 30% across both of those skill pieces is going to be a pretty sizable change to the way we play our builds. It could change the way builds are played. It could make some builds not playable at all. We won't be able to keep Grizzly Rage up nearly as often with a 30% reduction. So it's going to take some testing to figure out if this is going to be a huge game changer, but 30% is pretty significant. I think that it's going to be. It's going to slow down the overall gameplay of the entire game, because this is across all different, all different classes. Cooldown reduction is for every single class, and then the trap and imbuement cooldown reduction is for the rogues specifically, so they are getting hit the hardest by that. Another change, this is huge, is going to be the critical strike damage reduction. So it says we're seeing critical strike damage and vulnerable damage often viewed as a hard requirement for a build success in Diablo 4. We believe this is a step towards allowing more builds to flourish, and will continue to make changes in support of this goal. Well, that's not particularly true, and it tells me that they don't really have an understanding of why these two things are good. This isn't going to make more builds flourish. These two things would be good on every build, no matter what. So you're still going to have these same builds that are good because they are have been sifted through and have been determined to be mechanically the best builds to play. And then you use these general multipliers like critical strike damage and vulnerable damage to just make them do more damage. So the same abilities are still going to be good because they're mechanically better than everything else, and you're still going to scale them the same way. And that's because they are in different damage buckets, right? So I don't think it's going to change very much. You're still going to build your build the same exact way you did before. The thing is, now you're just going to do less damage than you were doing before. That's really the only change there is. That the one thing that this might change and might make itemization a little bit easier, if the vulnerable damage and the crit damage has been reduced by enough, it might mean that using some of the other things like core skill damage, damage while fortified, damage while the enemy is CC'd, so on and so forth, it brings the gap a little bit closer between that and vulnerable damage and crit damage. But before, there's a very big gap between those two things. If the gap is closed enough, that would mean that you wouldn't see a big significant damage difference on using an item that was rolled slightly worse than an item that had, you know, like core skill, crit chance, and vulnerable on it, like you would previously. That'd be like a perfect weapon for most builds. So we'll have to see what this does here. This is just across the board, everybody's just going to be doing less damage, it seems like. There's some other ones that are being thrown in here. Critical strike damage, which is inherent on swords, and then vulnerable damage inherent on crossbows. So this is the this is going to be the implicit modifier, I'm pretty sure. So they're lowering the implicit modifiers on these. It does seem kind of weird, personally. Damage to frozen being increased. I guess that's a good one. Maybe good for sorks. I don't know. And maybe rogues, they could use the freezing imbuement, though I'm pretty sure the other imbuments are still just better. But overall, everybody's gonna be doing less damage with this, so be aware of that. In closing, guys, we're gonna take a look at some of the other tweets popping up here that we found about the Diablo 4 patches going on. The biggest one coming from Karn, who is a PoE racer, PoE enjoyer, ARPG player extraordinaire, saying that this is possibly the worst game patch he's ever seen in the history of video games. And I gotta say, the patch overall is pretty bad. The biggest problem is probably going to be the fact that they told us in the last live stream the patch is already done. They've already packed it up. Sure, they can make small changes here and there to certain things, but the meat of the patch was already done. And they're already working on Season 2. When Season 2 comes out, they're already going to be halfway through Season 3, so on and so forth. I understand that, you know, the amount of time it takes to make this content, they need to be ahead of schedule, obviously. But that does lead into the problem that we're seeing here, where the changes that they're making, the buffs and nerfs and, you know, overall gameplay changes don't really match the sentiment of the community. And while I don't think they should bend to every need of the community, they're obviously very, very far off the mark on what people were expecting here. And that's, again, because a lot of this stuff was done before we were even playing the game and able to even provide feedback for them. So they will need to find a little bit of a middle ground here on how they're going to deal with that. I'm still going to be playing Diablo 4 on Season 1 launch, and you know, it's going to be fine. Everybody's nerfed, right? You're not nerfed specifically. Everybody's nerfed. We're all going to be playing on the same battlefield there, and you know, I'm still going to enjoy it, and you'll probably enjoy it too. And if we don't, hey, Path of Exile is right around the corner. ExileCon coming up soon. Last Epoch is a fantastic ARPG, and there's a lot of other games out there for us to play. So if you're, all I can say is, don't berate the devs. Don't go to Reddit and just, you know, yell at everybody. Don't send no death threats to nobody. Don't be that person. If you're not liking the game, don't play the game. That's the best thing you can do. And if you are enjoying the game, do play the game. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like my content specifically, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you guys later. Adios, muchachos.